Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner mini-episode, I have a story with the Grim Reaper and Bigfoot folks. Both stories are very, very bizarre, and we're going to look into them right now, so let's get into it. In 1990, a 20-year-old woman living alone in a semi-detached back-split house in Ontario began suffering violent night terrors that quickly escalated into something far more disturbing. What she initially dismissed as nightmares soon manifested as recurring visits to her bedroom by a cloaked skeletal figure and a grotesque gargoyle-like companion. Nearly 3 decades later, the same entity returned, this time witnessed by her teenage son. This is the account of Monica Paulino and her son Alex, who both insist that they saw the same dark figure standing at the foot of a bed 28 years apart. In 1990, Monica Paulino had just moved into her new home. She was 20 years old and living independently for the first time. Within a week of settling in, her sleep was disrupted by violent dreams. In these episodes, she witnessed people being killed in brutal ways. The imagery was graphic and relentless. Dismemberment, decapitation, bloodshed. The dreams repeated night after night. Months later, the disturbance crossed from dream to waking life. Monica awoke to find a dark shadow standing inside her bedroom closet. She watched as it moved slowly toward the foot of her bed. What she saw next shocked her. Standing there was what she could only describe as the Grim Reaper. It wore a dark robe. Its face appeared skeletal. In its hand was a scythe. But the cloaked figure was not alone. Sitting on the bed near her legs was a small gargoyle-like being. She described it as having rough alligator-like skin and clawed hands. The creature repeatedly glanced toward the robed figure as if awaiting instruction. At first, Monica assumed she was experiencing a nightmare, yet the scene replayed repeatedly. She would awaken to find them in the room. After several moments, they would gradually fade from view. During this period, she began finding bruises and unexplained scratches on her body. Fearful, she started sleeping on the sofa while clutching a Bible. Eventually, she moved out of the house. The manifestations stopped. For 28 years, she never saw the entity again. However, she never forgot it. In 2018, Monica was living in another home with her teenage son, Alex. She had often told him about the entity and its companion. That winter, she returned from a retreat and soon began feeling severely ill and depressed. Insomnia set in. She felt restless and anxious. One morning, she woke to the sound of an ominous voice, though no one was present. Days later, while walking down the hallway toward her bedroom, she looked inside and froze. Standing at the end of her bed was the same Grim Reaper figure she had seen when she was 20 years old. The details were identical. The robe, the skeletal face, the posture. She screamed. Alex ran upstairs and stopped in the hallway. He later confirmed that he too saw the cloaked figure standing in the bedroom. He stared at it in shock. According to both witnesses, the entity appeared solid and fully formed. Alex began shouting at it to leave. The figure vanished from the room. They rushed to the window. Now it was standing on the lawn outside, looking up at them. It appeared to have relocated instantaneously. Shortly afterward, psychic medium Lori Kindred was called to investigate. During the examination of the bedroom, Monica, Alex, Lori, and another investigator opened the door and reportedly heard the words evil, hell, and blood spoken aloud despite no visible source. Lori concluded that the presence was malevolent. She conducted a crossing over ritual and declared the entity expelled. Following the ritual, Monica's illness subsided and activity ceased. What was this entity that haunted Monica and her son Alex? What was this little gargoyle-like thing she saw as well? Were these demons, or was it a potent of death? And why would basically banishing it stop something like the Grim Reaper? Most likely this was an entity taking the form of the Grim Reaper, as well as that little gargoyle thing was another such entity. Either way, we don't know, but maybe if there's further information, we'll know more about it. Either way, let's get on to the next story. Massive biped at Connecticut Lakes, remote New Hampshire, Maine, Quebec border encounter raises questions. Let's hear about this Bigfoot encounter and what it entails as well, folks, now. In September, deep in the far northern wilderness near the Connecticut Lakes at the tri-state corner of New Hampshire, Maine, and Quebec, 2 experienced outdoorsmen had an encounter that has remained for them for years. This is not considered a classic Bigfoot hotspot, yet locals quietly admit that strange stories circulate in the region. What approached their tent at 2 a.m. was heavy, foul-smelling, and not moving on 4 legs. So indeed, it was on 2, and it was moving like a man, but it was not a man, folks. So let's read on and hear exactly what transpired with this particular encounter, folks. The witness states that he and a longtime friend were raised as serious outdoorsmen. Both had been trained by their fathers in hunting, fishing, and backcountry survival. They described themselves as disciplined and experienced in remote wilderness travel. They planned a 3-week canoeing, fishing, and hunting trip beginning at Connecticut Lake. After a long drive north from Massachusetts, they traveled at least 15 miles up a logging road without seeing any sign of civilization for nearly 45 minutes. Darkness fell quickly. There was no moon, and the road was tightly flanked by thick tree banks on both sides. With visibility fading, they pulled into the clearest patch they could find and set up a quick overnight camp. They grabbed only their packs and tents, leaving food and firearms locked inside the truck. Due to concerns about black bears, they walked roughly 100 yards down a bank toward a creek they could hear but not see and set up 2 small tents. Both men fell asleep quickly. At approximately 2 a.m., they were awakened simultaneously by the sound of something very large moving near their tents. The witnesses said they were certain it was a bear at first. The animal was heavy-footed, breathing loudly and sniffing. What startled them most was that they had not heard it approach until it was already extremely close, possibly within 3 feet of the thin nylon wall. They froze. For nearly 2 minutes, the creature remained outside the tent. The witness described the odor as overwhelming and foul. He had previously encountered large predators, including jaguars, and noted that big game animals can carry a strong scent. At that moment, they assumed it was a black bear investigating the camp. Then they heard a whoop. It was not a typical bear vocalization. The witness described it as coming from a very large animal, deep and resonant. He and his friend were so frightened that they instinctively pressed together and cautiously controlled their breathing to avoid making any noise. Moments later, they heard shuffling. What followed changed their assessment completely. The creature moved off through the brush, but on 2 feet. Both men stated they were certain of the bipedal gait. The sound of crushing vegetation was consistent with something large moving upright, not on 4 legs. In the immediate aftermath, they tried to rationalize what they had heard. Perhaps it was a person, maybe they had unknowingly camped on private land, but they quickly dismissed the idea. They were at least 15 miles from their nearest home in extremely remote territory. There were no lights, no vehicles, and no indication of human presence at 2 a.m. They remained awake until dawn. As soon as there was enough light to safely navigate, they broke camp and left the area. The witness emphasized that they never spoke about the incident afterward. No reports were filed. No one was told. Only years later did he decide to recount the experience. He concludes that either a roughly 400-pound man was wandering deep in the northern wilderness without a light, or they had encountered something else entirely. What that something else was, no one is really quite sure. All we know is that people look at legends and look at sightings of things they don't understand and think that it might be something they at times don't want to name, folks, that indeed it's the legendary Bigfoot. Was this such a creature, folks? Could it actually be real that Bigfoot wanders the wilderness in North America, folks? And what about around the world? If that's true, why? Is it much like the first story we read about, folks, that it's something taking the form of a Bigfoot, like the entity took the form of the Grim Reaper? Remember, in that story, that psychic was able to banish the entity, so that makes me think that it wasn't actually the Grim Reaper, along with that little gargoyle creature that was frightening the witness. Maybe this entity took the form of Bigfoot because it was there to frighten these 2 men, maybe feed off their fear, and in doing so, become far more real, maybe allowing it to crash through the wilderness. If that is true, folks, then what is this entity? Is it a demon, some sort of interdimensional interloper? Or is it possible that Bigfoot and the Grim Reaper are indeed real entities? But what about that little gargoyle creature, folks? Was it a demon? Or, like the Grim Reaper and Bigfoot, there are other things living on this planet we just don't truly understand that inhabit it and live their lives alongside of us. But what were they doing, especially with the witness in the first story? Why did the Grim Reaper and this little gargoyle, what were they up to? And why? We don't know. All I know for sure, folks, is that at least with the Bigfoot story, if indeed Bigfoot is real, it's an animal that is hopefully is a very good animal and leaves people alone, folks, and was just curious about these 2 witnesses. Either way, folks, we're at the end, so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read comics, they're bad for you. You can use the YouTube link down below in the descriptions or the chat to go subscribe me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure to hit the part of the bell that'll give you all future notifications. And please share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video. So be sure to come back again then. Till next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.